and welcome back to Radio. I'm your host, Cynthia Thompson. I want to ask you all a question. Have you ever wondered what exactly it takes to make sure that all of our kids are successful in schools? It takes a lot more than just teachers and the principals and the staff there. Here in Charlotte, we have an organization called Communities in Schools, and they also have a hand in making sure that all our children are successful during their time while they're in school. Today, my guest is Dr. Bill Anderson, and he is the Executive Director of Communities in School. Thank you for joining me today, Dr. Anderson.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
I want to ask you, and I want you to share with our viewers, what exactly is Communities in School?
Well, Communities in Schools is a nonprofit organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our goal is really pretty basic. Our goal is to help our community and help CMS increase graduation rates for our students. Currently, we have a number of our students that actually get to the 9th grade and 4 years later do not graduate.
Oh, no.
And so our goal is to help raise graduation rates through a number of ways.
So how long has this been in operation, Communities in Schools?
Communities in Schools used to be called Cities in Schools. And we began in Charlotte back in 1985. We began in 85 at one school. We were at J.T. Williams Junior High, and there was one site coordinator serving 80 students. So that was
That's
quite
a
a while
lot.
ago. Yeah, it is.
And so is this a nationwide organization or
Yes.
just for
Yes.
Charlotte?
No, we're a part of a national affiliate. Communities in Schools is in 29 states. And as of last year, we served 1.4 million students across the country. Here in Charlotte, we served 5,200 students last year.
Whoa.
In 46 different CMS schools.
Wow. And why do you see a need for us to have this community in school? You said earlier it's to help the graduation
Yes.
rate.
Yes.
Is it there for anything else besides that?
Absolutely. You know, our name is Communities in Schools, and I guess the message to you and your viewers is that the school district can't do it all.
Right.
And there's some students and families that need a little extra help, and that's where we come in. We provide extra help for these students in a number of ways. We pay really close attention to their attendance. We pay attention to grades, to behaviors, to needs. Students might not have a school uniform, or they might need some food, or they might need to go see a dentist, or they might need to see a doctor, or they might need mental health services, or they might need referrals to United Family Services or to other groups. And so the thing that makes our organization unique is that our full-time site coordinators that are in the schools are there every single day. They work in the schools, they have an office there, they work alongside the counselors, the assistant principals, the teachers. And so the fact that we are there means we're one of the team. And I guess the simplest way to put it is that we kind of wear two hats, the site coordinators. Hat one is they're there to help the principal and serve that school in any capacity they can. And hat two is that we're like a social worker, that we're trying to meet the needs of those kids for things that might not always be academic.
So how do you find the kids or the students that need this extra help?
Well, that's a good question too. And most of our sites, they serve 100 students. Sometimes it's 90, sometimes it might be 120, but the average is 100. And all the students that are eligible, first of all, it's a volunteer organization. Nobody has to be in Communities in Schools, but we have a waiting list in most of our school sites.
When you say a waiting list of kids that need help?
Yes.
Or, okay.
Yes, and teachers or staff members that would like that student to be served by Communities in Schools. But not any student can be a part of Communities in Schools.
Oh, really?
No, they have to be eligible for our services by meeting what's called, we have a high-risk checklist that has a number of different characteristics or a number of issues, and the students have to meet some of those needs. It could be problems at home, it could be attendance issues, it could be grade issues, it could be they're part of a gang. There are a number of things that can help them meet that criteria.
So I take it when you just mentioned gangs, I take it you work with the police department also?
Yes, we do. We do. We work with the police officers in the schools, and most of our schools have a police officer, so we work closely with them. I work with Rodney Monroe on a couple of initiatives. We're doing some gang initiatives with the police. So there are a number of things we do, but probably what sets us apart too is we're not an assistant principal. We're not Department of Social Services. So we can really, we're not, we're there to help, to encourage, and to really develop those relationships with the students and their families.
You know, let's take a short commercial break,
Okay.
and when we come back, we're going to talk about what different programs you offer for the elementary students, the junior high, and the high school students.
Sounds great.
Okay?
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm a mommy. I love kids. I'm responsible, loving, nurturing. No, don't touch that! Stop! Being a parent's a lot of work.
You don't have to be perfect
Where's mommy?
to be a perfect parent.
Here I am. No, stop. Stop.
Welcome back to Better You. I'm here with Dr. Anderson, and we've been talking about communities and schools and all the things that they do for our students and for families, too.
Yes.
So before we went on break, I said we were going to talk about what all you offer the services for kids in elementary schools. Let's start with them.
Well, we really have 4 programs. We serve students in elementary schools, we serve students in the middle school, and then we serve 2 groups of students in the high schools. The elementary school students, their needs are a little bit different. The elementary school students, the way we might choose an elementary school student is because we might get a tip from a teacher or from a social worker that the student's having some problems at home, or the student has missed school for 5 or 6 days in a row, or we could tell that the student might need some clothes. So what we do is we work closely with the families. We also work with truancy court. Truancy court is for those students that miss a lot of school, and there are judges that actually come into the school.
Really?
And this is before they get in trouble actually with the real judge in real court, so we help set that up. We also do food in some of our schools where students may not have enough food at home, where they get a backpack every Friday afternoon that they take home. Like I said earlier, we do school uniforms, but the other thing we do is that we provide tutors and mentors for these students.
That's good.
We provide volunteers, so we help coordinate that whole volunteer piece. And so we have a number of volunteers that come into our schools, and elementary schools seem to be where people really like to volunteer, and that seems to be the best place for the volunteers. So we manage a lot of volunteers. We have another program called it's Partners for Success, sponsored by a group here in town called Social Venture Partners. And what we're doing there is we're going out to small businesses and faith organizations and getting them to come in and actually adopt the school. There are some schools in our community that have very few partners, have very few resources, have really small PTAs, or the PTAs are basically non-existent. And when you compare those to some of the schools out in the more affluent areas in our community that might be able to raise just tremendous amounts of money and have huge PTAs, you know, the playing field's not level. And so what we do is we try to bring some of these organizations, and great people like Social Venture Partners really help us by recruiting some of these new businesses and industries to come in and take on a school. And it's really worked well. You want to know about middle schools?
Middle schools.
Okay.
Now that's the tough years. Middle school.
You know, I worked in middle schools for a number of years back in my previous career in CMS, and I think middle school kids are a little bit misunderstood. They're growing into their bodies, the hormones are hopping, there are just lots of issues, there's a lot of drama. You know, middle school kids, things that aren't important to high school kids or elementary school, oh, it's life or death for middle school kids. So you really need to get to know the students. But when we get to middle school, though, we start focusing a little bit different. It's really about preparing kids to make sure that they're going to be academically competitive, so when they get to high school. So we have a program called Kids to College, where we select students and we actually go and visit college campuses, and they tour a college campus. And most of the students that I'm talking about, nobody in their family went to college, so it's a first-time visit. They've never been to a college campus. And when they think about college, they think about Carolina basketball. And so we visit the school, we eat lunch at the school, we take a tour of the buildings, and so we plant those seeds early. We also have some student leadership teams where we choose students to actually be in leadership roles and to become positive role models, and they usually had never had that opportunity to be a leader before. So, you know, you put some responsibility on them to behave better, to get better grades, and then we do a lot of rewards. For students who have perfect attendance, they might get some rewards. Students that have good behavior, there's some incentives for them also. And then we get to high school.
High school.
High school, we have two different programs. We have a 9-10 program that focuses on 9th and 10th graders only because their needs are very different than juniors and seniors.
Right.
Unfortunately, in our community, as I mentioned earlier in the show, that for every 100 students that start the 9th grade, 4 years later, only 70 graduate on time. And if you break that down a little bit more by looking at other factors such as race, if you broke it down for African Americans, only 60 out of 100 graduate on time. If you break it down for our Spanish-speaking students, only 55 out of 100 graduate on time. So, and this isn't a problem that's unique to Charlotte. This is really a problem across our country. And so we really pay attention to 9th and 10th graders to make sure they're passing their classes, they're coming to school. If they start to lose hope, to catch them, bring them back, find some mentors, find some tutors, find somebody who really basically wants to develop a relationship with that child, because that at the end of the day is what matters more than anything.
Right.
It is the relationship that that adult has with the student, and that's one of CIS's 5 basics. One of our 5 basics is developing a positive relationship with a significant adult, a one-on-one relationship with a significant adult. And it is just critical. So our 9th graders, we pay really close attention to attendance. That's probably our #1 indicator when students start to slip. And our goal is to make sure that we get them to the 11th grade. Once they get to the 11th grade and they're handed off to the 11-12 site coordinator, then they're going to focus more on college. They're going to start thinking about college and preparing for college and financial aid forms and scholarships and, you know, making sure that we can make that transition to the next level.
You mentioned attendance a couple of times.
Yes.
On the high school level, you know, you can miss the whole day, or you can miss half a day, or miss a class or two. So do you look at the entire attendance rate, or just if they miss the entire day of class?
We look at everything.
Oh, you do.
But I have to tell you, when I first came to Communities in Schools 4.5 years ago, I knew that attendance, based upon my previous role in CMS, I knew attendance for high school students was directly linked to student success or student failure. And the students who missed more days in high school were more than likely to fail. And there's also some policies, if you miss more than 10 days, you automatically take an F in that class.
Whoa.
But I never had any idea how many elementary school students and middle school students miss 10, 20, and 30 days of school in a year.
Really?
Really. And after we collected that data after the first year, it became very apparent to me that attendance was probably the most important indicator we needed to pay attention to. And I will tell you that elementary school kids, they don't miss 10, 20, 30 days of school because they don't like school.
Yeah.
They're missing those days because their parents allow them to miss those days.
Yeah.
And there's problems at home. And sometimes the mom might be having some problems herself and wants the child to stay with her. And there's lots of different things. So attendance is probably, and CMS doesn't have the staff to really look at that, and that's where we come in and help. I told you we're like a social worker. That's how we're kind of like a social worker, but we monitor attendance on a weekly basis. We have a data sharing agreement with CMS, and they're really good about giving us access to that information, and so we pay really close attention to it.
Pants, pants, pants. I am folding the pants. The pants are long. Do they go on my head? Do they? Do the pants go on my head? No. They go on.
Everyday moments can become teaching moments because learning starts long before school does. Give your child the start they need at bornlearning.org.
What are some things that people can do if they want to volunteer to help communities in
Well,
school?
what they can do is they can go to our website, which is www.cischarlotte.org. Very, very easy. And there's a click on to volunteer, and that sends you right to our volunteer coordinator, a woman named Angela Yu. And Angela will get in touch with you. She'll get your contact information. She will talk to you about what you think you'd like to do. Would you like to work in a middle school? Would you like to work in an elementary school? Do you want to be a tutor for a high school student? There are a number of different options. We try to work it out for you. And then our site coordinator serves as the connector at the school. So you'll never go to a school and sit in the lobby and wait. You know, if you're coming at 9 o'clock on Tuesday, they're going to have the student down there. It's going to be nice and smooth. And so we help place those volunteers in the place that works best for them.
So if I wanted to volunteer
Yes.
in an elementary school,
Yes.
what would I be doing with this child?
There are a number of things you could do. You could be a lunch buddy if you weren't comfortable with being a tutor or being a reading buddy. You could just come in and have lunch with that child, and you'd be amazed at how much that child would really appreciate you coming. It's so easy to do, and you can make such a difference by just being that significant adult that's interested in them. You know, you're a professional person. You are able to do so much by just being that role model and talking to them and asking them how they're doing. Or if you wanted to be a reading buddy, where you just want to come in and work on literacy and work on reading skills, you could do that. You can be a math tutor. There's a math program that we're working on with our friends from Social Venture Partners right now, where you'll actually be trained to be a math teacher, tutor, and you can work with a student. And we ask our volunteers to come at least once every 2 weeks. If you can come once a week, that's even better. But if you can come once every 2 weeks, that's perfect.
You know, I have a niece. She's in the, oh gosh, she's 8 years old, and I
Third
go
grade.
eat lunch with her from time to time. And oh my God, her face just lights up, and oh, my aunt's here, my aunt's here.
And you just, I don't think people realize also not only how much the volunteer gets out of it, how much you get out of going in and making a difference in that child's life. And it's so easy to do.
And it really is.
And we really, that's really what we need, is we need people. I mean, we need money too. We're raising money all the time because we're a large organization. We have 80 employees total. But we need people. We need people to give of themselves and give of their time.
And so what would a volunteer do in a middle school setting?
In a middle school setting, it's usually going to be more focused on working with a student who has a specific academic need and working on their math or working on their reading. We do have some places where they're just lunch buddies, but it usually becomes a little bit more significant and a little bit more academic.
And of course, with high school, you had mentioned earlier, you're looking for people to be mentors.
We're looking, and we have some really great relationships with some of our companies here in town that have actually adopted schools. For instance, Duke Energy, they have adopted Philip O'Berry Academy of Technology, and so we work very closely with some of the engineers and scientist type people from Duke Energy, and they come out to the school and they lead sessions with the students. They take them on over to the building, and they do service learning and do some things like that.
Well, I want to ask you a question that I didn't send to you when I sent my list of questions. Do you do fun things with the high school students?
Yes, we do. We take some field trips with the students. We go on college trips with the students. So yes, we do some fun things. And we also do some cultural events too, where we go to plays or we go to musical concerts, because a lot of our kids have never been exposed to some of those things also. So we do some of those things as well.
I know you mentioned earlier that businesses can help you out with this too. What are some other things that businesses do to help communities and schools?
They provide us with funds. We're very fortunate that some of the banks in town are extremely generous to communities and schools. We have some foundations that are extremely generous to us. You know, organizations like us that we have as many employees as we have, they're expensive to run. So we are constantly going out to different foundations, telling our story, asking them to support us. One of the models that we're using now, though, is we're having corporations and foundations actually sponsor school sites. And so we have a number of them that sponsor different schools, and then their whole group of employees will actually go to that school and serve as the tutors. And that site coordinator serves as the connector. So she hooks them up with the kids, and it really is working well.
So does communities in school, and this is kind of a stupid question, do they do anything for college students?
You know, it's really interesting you say that, because as I was talking to you earlier today, I was in a meeting all day long today. That meeting was with officials from UNC Charlotte and CPCC and CMS, and it's called Partners for Secondary Success. And what we're trying to do, one of the missions of communities and schools is to help kids become college ready, so that when they graduate, we can help them fill out their college applications, their scholarship forms, so they can go to college. But unfortunately, the completion rate in college is pretty dismal.
Really?
A lot of students start college and don't finish for a lot of different reasons. So this Partners for Secondary Success group, we are writing a grant to the Gates Foundation that will help fund whatever it is we think our community needs to support these students when they get to college. And we're not talking about babysitters, but we're talking about somebody that actually meets with these students on a regular basis to check on their academic needs, to check on their social needs, to check on their financial needs, because their parents can't do it a lot of times. Because the parents don't know, the parents a lot of times do not know how to advocate for their child because they've never experienced that. They don't know what to do. And having had a couple kids go through college, there's always these interesting hidden expenses. Dad, I need some money for parking, or I need this or that. And you know, a lot of folks are on really tight budgets, as you know, these days. And so it's, a lot of kids get to school and they just don't have enough money. And so rather than ask somebody and try to figure it out, they'll just drift away. And so this whole initiative with the Gates Grant and UNC Charlotte, Foundation for the Carolinas, Central Piedmont Community College, and CMS as Partners for Secondary Success, that's what it's all about. So it's great you asked me that question, because we're working on that today.
The mailbox and the traffic light. Both are ideas from the minds of African Americans. Support the United Negro College Fund, because
I'm glad you mentioned one other thing when you were talking about the college students. We all know that money is tight for everybody right now. How has that impacted communities and schools?
I have to say there are more kids in need than ever before. We have families, we have mothers that will come up to our site coordinators that maybe a year before they had said, I need some paper and pencil. This year they need clothes. And so, well, the husband lost the job. She doesn't have a job, so they don't have clothes. And so we will go to some of our partners, or we'll go to one of our church friends, and we'll take the information to them, and then they'll take care of the needs of that. We also make referrals to Crisis Assistance Ministry. We make referrals to other agencies in town. So we're, as I said, I use the term connector. That's what we are. Based upon the need for that child and the families, our site coordinator connects them to the resources they need in the community. But yes, things are bad. Things are really bad, especially for the working poor. That's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, that many of the poor people that are receiving help, they're working, but they just can't pay their bills. A lot of the homeless people are working poor. Times are tough.
So with that being said, how do you see communities and schools in the future here in Charlotte?
Well, I wish for the day when there's not a need for communities and schools, because that means everybody's getting taken care of. But in the immediate future, that Superintendent Gorman wants us to be in another 20 schools.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he knows the value of what we do. He knows we do it very well, and that we're a partner with CMS, and that we're there to serve them, and that we're there, like I said, from the morning until the end of the day. So he wants us in another 20 plus schools. But that means, how do we find the funds to make that happen? So we're constantly trying to come up with new ways to find those funds.
I want to ask you one last question. This is the toughest question of the evening. How do you think the closings of the schools here in Charlotte is going to impact the students that are moving to the other schools that are open? You're going to be faced with a lot more challenges with those students going to a new school, and most of them not wanting to leave their school. So what is your plan for those kids?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question, because a number of the schools where we have full-time site coordinators are the ones that have been slated to close, because all the schools we're in have very high percentages of students who are living in poverty or eligible for free lunch. We are in the most fragile schools in CMS, and so a number of them are going to be closing and combining with other schools. And one of the things that we stress, and our site coordinators completely understand, is that we're not there to necessarily serve a school. We're there to serve the students in that school, and so it's really all about students. CMS is in a tough spot. We've never had the kind of cuts that we've had the past 2 years, and probably will have again this year. I don't think Dr. Gorman and the school board wanted to ever have to think about closing schools, but the reality is the money's just not there. And I'm afraid there's going to be some more painful cuts. And so I guess what I would suggest to the community is that we all need to get behind this and do the best we can to support our students and support our families. Families are critical to the education of children. You know, healthy families make healthy schools. So what can we do to help our families become healthier and support these schools? But I will tell you, the playing field's not level. In many of the schools that are struggling, it's much more difficult for them. It's more difficult for those principals to hire the absolute best teachers and keep those teachers there. It's hard for the PTAs to raise the money. And we have to continue supporting those schools differently and give them extra.
If you could have anything you want to make sure communities and schools is successful, what would you like to have?
If I could have anything I want, well, it all goes back to funding, and I don't want to sound greedy, but I'd like to have the funds to be able to have at least one site coordinator in every Title I school. That's a school that has 75% or more of their students living in poverty. I would like to have the program directors, one program director for every 10 schools, so that we had adequate coverage for all those schools so we could serve more students.
Thank you so much for joining me
My
today,
pleasure.
Dr.
Enjoyed
Anderson. You know, I've learned a lot from you today. And if people wanted to know more about communities in school, what is your website again?
www.cischarlotte.org.
Okay, and if you want to know more information about A Better You and my future guests, or about Dr. Anderson, you can go to my website at www.abetteryoushow.com. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
Okay.
3 out of 4 kids are not as secure as they should be because their car seats are not used correctly. But the latch system makes it easier to get it right and to hold your kids tight. Anchor, tether, latch. Learn more at safercar.com.